Hi, and welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm, brought to you by funkandstuff.net. This is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I'm your host, Scott Dr. Goldfine, musicologist and author of Everything is on the One, the first guide of funk. If you don't have your copy, get on over to Amazon and pick one up. You'll be glad you did. It's fun to read, it's informative, and if you love music, especially funk, it's a can't miss. Makes a great gift, and have a couple copies around the house. Okay. Whether you're watching or listening, I thank you very much for your continued interest and support in the program. You can see the show at funkandstuff.net or on YouTube, and you can also hear it in its podcast version on iTunes or from other leading podcast providers. Also subscribe. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube on the Funk and Stuff channel, and that'll connect you into all things Truth and Rhythm. You'll get early premieres and lots of fun, great stuff. It's free. Tell friends, tell family. Continue to support the show. This is your show, and we appreciate that support, and I do very much. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This episode features drummer Keith Killgo of the sensational funk jazz group the Blackbyrds, which was founded in the early 1970s by renowned trumpeter and, at the time, chairman of Howard University's Department of Jazz Studies, Donald Byrd. The Blackbyrds released 7 albums from 1974 to 1980, and that's 10 top 40 R&B hits. Those were Do It Fluid, Walking in Rhythm, Happy Music, Rock Creek Park, City Life, Flying High, Time is Moving, Soft and Wet, Supernatural Feeling, and Unfinished Business. Walking in Rhythm and Happy Music were also top 20 pop hits. 3 of their albums reached the top 35 of Billboard's top 200 albums chart, and they placed 5 albums in the top 15 of the R&B albums chart. 4 of those went top 10. The Blackbyrds only recorded 1 album after 1977, and it came and went without much fanfare. In 1999, Killgo and several other original members reunited to begin performing again, and that eventually led to a comeback album in 2012. Since their heyday, the band's influence has only grown, as many of their beats were sampled and nicked by the hip-hop community, and their popularity helped fuel the UK's acid jazz and jazz funk movements. Today, they continue to hit the stage both domestically and abroad. Here, Killgo discusses his musical upbringing, his college years and formation of the Blackbyrds, the band's albums and tracks, why the group disbanded, the many sides of mentor Donald Byrd, his current position as a music educator, the qualities that make for a great musician, bringing the group back together, and current and upcoming projects. It's time for Truth and Rhythm to get in rhythm with the man who continues to walk in rhythm, Mr. Keith Killgo. I'm so pleased to welcome to the Truth and Rhythm Command Center the man who kept it all in the pocket for one of the great funk jazz R&B bands of all time. I'm speaking of drummer Keith Killgo from the mighty, mighty Blackbyrds. Keith, how are you? Thank you so much for joining me today.
Doing great, man. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, thank you.
Good, good.
Where am I talking to you from today?
This is where I teach. I teach at Tech Prep Friendship Public Charter School. I run the Fine Arts Department, and we do a variety of different things. We do marching band, of course, concert band, working on jazz band, choir, and that kind of thing. It's a STEM school, but they brought me on board to bring in the arts. So I've been here almost 5 years, and it's a very interesting experience. My initial reason I taught in DC public schools for many years, and my reasoning for trying to come to kind of a hybrid school that had a middle school and a high school is I felt if I could start the students in 6th grade, or maybe 5th or 6th grade, playing the instrument, drums, clarinet, flute, violin, whatever, that it would be so much easier for them to continue music once they got into high school versus teaching in high school and starting a student who's never played before in the 9th grade, which puts them at a great disadvantage if they would like to, pursue music as a career, because by the time they got to the 12th grade, they would be probably about 4 or 5 years behind on that instrument in terms of competition, in terms of reading, in terms of, being able to kind of catch up with where everybody else is. Because as we know, if you look at a regular education from first grade to the 12th grade, with a summer break, kids miss about 3 years of school anyway. So my goal was to fill that gap in with music so that they would kind of get caught up. So by the time they got to the 11th grade, they could audition for honors band. They could go to Norfolk because they pay a lot of money for students from DC. you know, I had one young lady who unfortunately she didn't take the scholarship, but she had a scholarship to Grambling. They pay them $6,000 a year to play in the marching band, and $4,000 a year to play in the concert band. So you could go to college and make 10 grand a year. I wish it had happened when I was in school. Okay. My mind was not, didn't look anywhere like that. But there's so many opportunities, and not just in music and dance and art and all that kind of thing. So that's my goal, is to create an educational appendage to the STEM academia aspect of education, and include those things for the music, because I don't think we really treat it very fairly in the market.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's so much needed. That's just been a tragedy how music's gotten out of the schools, to a great degree around the country. And my son's 14, he's playing alto sax, and he's getting ready to go into high school. Unfortunately, his middle school had a music program.
Right.
And I played alto sax myself beginning in grade school, and they still had it in grade school.
Right. Exactly.
So,
but see, that's the thing. Music is none other than it's just you can compare it to soccer or t-ball. Those kids, when my son started playing t-ball when he was like 5, 6 years old, then he went from there to the next level, then middle school, and all the way up to he didn't go into the pros or anything like that, but that's the kind of background he had in baseball. And believe me, and his biggest issue was that he lived on the East Coast, and the East Coast is basketball, it ain't baseball. And so when he got down to Rice and to Texas and to Florida and California, them guys, they eat and sleep baseball. And so he could see how, and it wasn't because he wasn't competitive. He just wasn't at that level, because they play baseball all year round. A lot of them are homeschooled, and that's all they do is play baseball. So when you're getting pitched at in high school like 120 mile an hour, ball, is a whole lot different from that 75 mile an hour ball, over here. So, and seeing that void, I see it really in music, because, I mean, the kid's got to start, man, 4 or 5 years old in the music in order to be, by the time he or she is 18, be in that competitive state, where they can truly use music as a solid, viable career, and not just the music aspect of it, the historical aspect of it, the audio visual aspect of the technology aspect. All those things need to be in sync by the time they're ready to get out here into the world.
Absolutely, you need every edge you can get.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, good for you, man. That's great to hear.
Thank you.
So going back to your childhood, when and how did you first get into the drums and music?
Well, my father's a musician. He played with a group called the JFK Quintet, which was Andrew White, Ray Codrington, Walter Booker, and Joe Chambers. And so pretty much, and my father played, around DC a lot. And they pretty much made their home the Bohemian Caverns. And every Saturday at my house was a rehearsal. So at these rehearsals, Mickey Newman was the drummer at the time. He left his drums, and as soon as they left, I came in, and I started banging on his drums. And in those days, we listened to records. They still might listen to them now, but we listened to records. And, my whole musical education at that point was watching and being observant and watching people play and reading the liner notes on Blue Note records, because Blue Note records gave you all the information you needed to know about the artist and what time signature it was in, what key it's in, and blah, 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 blah. And the experiences that they had in terms of writing the songs. So that was kind of my impetus, so my introduction into playing music. And I didn't really receive a drum set until later on, when actually my father thought he heard of somebody actually keeping some time in the basement. He said, "Wow, wait a minute, maybe this guy may not be pulling my leg after all." So got some little raggedy drum set, whatever. But it didn't matter to me. It was brand new. To me, I didn't care. And so from there, I just started playing and hanging out with my dad. And I got to play with Eddie Harris. I sat in with the Art Blakey Big Band, played with Miles Davis, Stanley Turrentine, with Shirley Scott. That shows how old I am. And Bobby Timmons. And so I just started playing. I didn't really study. I was studying piano with Roberta Flack for a while when I was in middle school. And I one Saturday, yeah, I told her I was sick. I can't come to class. I'm sick. Okay, but I was lying. And so I went to go to see Miles Davis at the Bohemian Caverns. And soon as I walked down the steps, she was standing there. So I thought you was sick. You're fired. So that was the end of my piano lessons with Roberta Flack. But I've loved her. She's loved me all these years. So, and we've stayed in touch. So it's a great experience.
And somehow you found your way to Howard University, right?
Yeah. When I graduated from high school, well, they used to have a venue in Baltimore called the Left Bank Jazz Society, and Saturday and Sunday they'd have artists from all over the place. And I was playing with a group that my dad was in, with Marshall Hawkins, bass player, and Mike Fogarty, I think, was playing saxophone. But Donald Byrd was playing in the same room. We came on before they did, and he had an older band. Keter Betts was playing with him. Of course, he knew my dad and all that. So I introduced myself, but he'd known my father because Bird used to come to D.C. while he was in Columbia to play on the weekends, and he'd sit in and play with my dad's band. So he said, "Oh man, so why don't you come to Howard?" I said, "Well, I really didn't want to stay in D.C. I ain't gonna lie to you. I was like, man, I want to get out of here for a minute and see something else." So I didn't, I didn't go to Howard right away. I went to Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois, which is the hometown of Richard Pryor. And it wasn't going to the Midwest was a culture shock at best, from a little country boy from DC.
Colder
And
too.
Colder
too.
Oh man, colder too, man. I took like swimming like 8 o'clock in the morning, some craziness and whatever. But it was a wonderful experience because most of the guys that were there were from Chicago. So of course my roommate was from Chicago, and we started running back and forth to Chicago, playing with Charles Washington and Sonny Seals and a lot of the local jazz musicians, Malachi Thompson, trumpet player, a lot of Mujan Thomas, guitar player, who's been teaching at Berkeley for the last how many years. And I kind of grew up there in the jazz world because that was my roommate, and we'd go to Chicago every weekend in the raggedest possible car we could find, and play gigs, and it was kind of cool. And then I came back home, and they had a concert at Howard with Joe Henderson, and I forgot who else was on the show, but Joe had Woody Shaw, Hal Galper on piano, Stanley Clark on bass, Pete Yellen on saxophone, Joe Chambers on drums. However, what happened was that Stanley Clark and Hal Galper were playing with Stan Getz at the Blues Alley. And so like midstream of the concert, they start packing their stuff up, rolling out. So I was playing Kevin, Tony, and I had a group called Kaleidoscope. We kind of opened for them. And so I got home that evening and I got two phone calls. One phone call from Horace Silver and another phone call from Joe Henderson. And Horace said, hey man, I'd love for you to come, play with my band. I said, oh wow. Let me ask my dad and see what he says. He said, okay. So I hung up. The next minute, Joe Henderson called. He said, hey man, I'd love for you to play my band. I was like, okay, Joe it is. And so I played with Joe for about 2 years. And then Kevin came to Kevin came to DC. And Donald said, well, we were playing together. And Donald said, hey man, where's Keith at? Let's hook it up. Because he had Alan Barnes and Barney Perry were already playing, and Kevin were playing with him. But he had Roland Wilson on bass and Joe Chambers on drums and Ray Armando playing percussion. And the old guys and the young guys just didn't get along. So he fired Roland Wilson and Joe Chambers, and he hired Joe Hall and Keith Killgo. And and we weren't really the Blackbyrds then. We were just the Donald Byrd quintet, or septet, or whatever it was. And we would play gigs, man. I don't know musicians ever heard of these gigs before. Well, you'd play in a club for like 3 weeks. We'd play like in the Burning Spear in Detroit for 3 weeks. We'd play at the Hippodrome in Philly for 2 weeks. And we had these long stints in clubs, which was kind of cool because you weren't traveling, but you could practice every day, and we rehearsed every day. And so midstream of that, Bird had been conversating with Orrin Keep News. Orrin Keep News, was the exec for Fantasy Milestone Records. And he said, well, man, I got this young group, da 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 da. Long short of it, we flew them to Berkeley, California, and recorded our first record, which was Blackbird. The Crows in the Field. We Do It Fluid and all that. And we know absolutely nothing. That was unbelievable because we knew nothing. We knew nothing about recording, man. We knew nothing about nothing. So Larry and Fonz Mizell had produced Donald's records. So they were the lead producer, Sky High Production. And Bird was just getting his production chops together. So he was kind of on the sideline. And so, they didn't have us come in, man, and just play. I just play snare, and hi-hat, and bass drum. And come back and put some toms on top of it. And come back and put some cymbal crashes on it, And I'd really never played the drum set, and broken up in those little small pieces like that. I had, but hadn't. And so we were listening. Let me show you how rookie I was. We were listening to the playback. And everybody kept hearing this ding, boing, this ringing sound. So what the hell is that? Well, it has to be my bass drum. He said it was tuned so tight, it sounded like a bongo. So that was when I learned that you had to take the front head off of a bass drum, put some towels and some rugs, whatever inside of it, just to get the click sound or the thump sound, and then roll into the bottom later. So, it was a absolute adventure, man. I wouldn't trade it for the world. Not knowing anything, and then in a year learning how to record. For real. Watching Harvey Mason and John Guerin, Ed Green, and the professionals, how they Bernard Purdy, how they recorded.
So Keith, at that point, early on, who was your playing mostly informed by? Who were some of your drumming influences?
Well, in the jazz world, of course, it was Tony Williams, and Philly Joe Jones, and of course Boo Hand on My Heart, um, uh, uh, Billy Higgins, Pete LaRocca, Mickey Roca, Lewis Hayes, so many, Ed Brooks. I mean, I listen to everybody. You know what I'm saying? There were no drummers that I didn't listen to. What was my man? Uh, and of course Joe Chambers, but it was another cat, older cat, Denzel Best from Baltimore. Elvin Jones, of course. Connie K. With the MJQ. You know, I listen to everybody. Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa, Joe Morello. Uh, so many cats. I was a I'm a kind of guy that I nothing inhibits me from doing what I wanted when I listen to. So I listen to everybody because everybody plays something different. Everybody has some different stuff, man. And no one cat just played all of it. Jack DeJohnette, I mean, just so many beautiful drummers. So, and that was in the jazz world. Of course, Enrique, to play with Sly Stone, Family Stone, my man from, I think his name, of course, Bernard Purdy. And the funk, Lex Humphreys, the guys that played all the funk, all the pocket drummers, of course Harvey Mason and Steve Gadd, and there is no cat that unless I couldn't find them, that I did not listen to,
Wow.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you were into funk also. I mean, did you feel limited at all going more in a funk direction, or were you cool with that?
I was cool with that. I mean, I grew up in the 60s, and pretty much Motown was strong. I had most of my cousins all girls, so I learned how to hand dance and do all that stuff, in the house on the weekends with my cousins, and so the pocket didn't have a thing, and playing it didn't have no thing because the repetitiveness of it, I found some joy in it. It was simple, but it was hard to hold that beat steady. Whereas jazz is the beat, it plays around the beat and under the beat and on top of the beat. Funk music is on the beat. And I never forget seeing James Brown. James Brown had two drummers, okay? And one of them would be playing just the pocket thing. The other one would be playing the cymbal thing, but it sounded like one cat. And I said to myself, man, if he needed two drummers to hold this thing down, this thing must be a beast, And so as I started listening to Parliament Funkadelic and all that kind of stuff, and I saw the value of the pocket, and I saw how I could incorporate that pocket into the jazz. And I think as a drummer, which I don't know how many drummers talk about it, we are the reason either people listen to music or don't. If they can't dance to it, then I don't care what kind of music you have, it ain't happening. Okay, I mean, reggae music, even the music, Celtic music, all it got some kind of groove to it, some kind of beat, and so I think the part of jazz that the Blackbyrds was able to retain was the improvisational part of it, because of course Donald was a literate writer and all the notes and all that, but the essence of it still had some youth connection, and young people could sit down and dance to it. And I think without that combination, when you look back historically in terms of music, when you go back to Duke Ellington's and all those people could dance to this music, and that's what made the music so popular. And if you fast forward to right now, that's what's happening. They dance to Bruno Mars. They can dance to the Wiz Khalifa. They can dance to all the hip hop stuff. And it is why so many young people don't play jazz or don't like jazz, because it's more eclectic, and it doesn't really serve that need that they have.
Well, going back to that first record, Keith, Do It Fluid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the lead-off cut of the first record,
Mm-hmm.
and just a great, great track. What do you remember about recording that one? I mean, it was as much fun in the studio as it sounds on the record.
Yeah, I mean the Mizell's production style, man, is very loose. I mean, it's we don't even know. It's like some songs that we don't know if it's going to be a B section. We'll be in the studio, recording, and Larry or Foss will write a B on a piece of paper and say B. Now we don't know what key we going to. We don't know what the groove is going to be. We just go to B. Whatever B is, that's what B is. And that's how we recorded. So we had fun. I mean, I sang. Well, you call it singing. My father never called it singing. He called it pedestrian vocals. But I sang the lead on "Do It Fluid." And what I remember most is that nobody said, no, don't do that. You know what I mean? Nobody said, wait, man, no, why are you doing that? No, just go. Just go. Okay. All right. Yeah. Do some more of that. Whatever that was. I only was do some more of that. And I think that kind of grassroots kind of recording, you could call it, that kind of pedestrian kind of feel is where the Blackbyrds got their sound from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you tour much off that first record, or did you wait for the second one?
Man, we were touring already. That's the whole thing. Byrd worked all of the time. It wasn't like we did a record and we had to go out because we had a record. We had been working a year or two before we even recorded the record, And so the record was just, and be quite honest with you, by the time that record came out, we couldn't play half the stuff on it, no way. So, we just now, after 35, 40 years, are actually able to play it, I mean, I never forget the first time we did Walking in Rhythm. It was an absolute disaster because it modulates up a half steps in the beginning, and Kevin was in one key and Bonnie was in another key, and I had this double bass drum kit from God knows where. I mean, it was just absolutely disaster. But we played a lot of colleges, and we played in Delaware and where Denzel Washington. He went to college somewhere in Albany. I think met him when he was very young. Because we did a lot of college touring. But eventually, we started playing on shows with people like it was called ultimately called Roger Zapp, but it was called Roger and Human Body when they first started coming out of Cincinnati. And we'd play shows like with those kind of bands, and man, we'd get smoked out because our stuff was too jazzy or wasn't, it didn't connect, and we sit back and watch these cats playing. Everybody's up grooving and dancing. Wait a minute, man, what are we doing here? So we had to come back and revamp some of the stuff. So we started playing the music off of that first record. And the first time we played Do It Fluid, I was playing keyboards, okay, because I had another drummer, Kirk Jacobs, playing drum. And it was the first time that we actually got an audience reaction, where people actually said, wow, yeah. So Byrd was like, oh, okay, so that's where it's at. Yeah, dude, this is where it's at. Okay, all them bebop tunes we've been playing, cancel. Okay, so, and it just led to the second record and the third record and so on and so forth. But that live performance that gave us that energy that, we needed to kind of push us forward came from, working the circus. But like I said, we were working all the time.
So in Walking in Rhythm, which was a little atypical because it was mellower than most of the material, but it hit big. How did that change the perspective and trajectory of the group?
Well, we never knew what it did. I mean, we didn't write songs that we actually listened to. Most of the time we recorded songs, we never even knew what they were going to sound like till they came out on the record because they'd send us home. So, we pretty much didn't know what was going on with them. I know that musically, the beat that I play on it is a bossa nova, and it's very jazzy and it's Inception, Alan Barnes. If you listen to the flute solo, those lines, those were lines that Donald Byrd made everybody in the band play. So we incorporated our education into these songs as well as our own instincts in terms of music. And so by the time Walking Rhythm was doing whatever it was doing, we weren't even thinking about it. We were on to City Life. We had gone on to the next record. And that's kind of how we lived. We didn't live like, okay, we did a record, and so where are we? It's like, no, man, forget that record. I'm writing this song tonight. Let's do this one, you know? So we never had that. Look, I mean, be quite honest with you, really never listening to the records until years and years later.
But you must have heard that on the radio. It must have been a kick to hear the Blackbyrds come through the radio.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the first time I don't think I heard Walking Around. I think the first song that I actually heard on the radio that I can remember is Happy Music and Rock Creek Park. And what I did when that record came out, I went to a radio station here in Washington, D.C. called WOL. And Bobby Bennett was one of the DJs, was a friend of mine. And I left the record on because he was on the air, and I left the record at his door. And, I got back into my little raggedy little duster and headed on home. And before I could get in the house, he was playing it.
Yeah, well, that record was the one that really got me deep into the Blackbyrds. And I think a lot of people probably come from the same place, City Life. I mean, that record, just wall to wall, all-time classic, man.
Well, I mean, the cool part is that we had built up some confidence, and had an opportunity to really hone our craft, So we were starting to loosen up. We were really changing even the stuff that we had done, because we were kind of writing in the same vein as the Mizelles, because that's where we learned, And then by the time we got to City Life, we were like, okay, so we had some like Thoughtful About Yourself. It's an oval song. Got a funny drum beat on it. We got some different kind of sounds we're trying to incorporate Kevin's tune, All I Ask, with harmonica and, those kind of things. So, it was a record that all of those moments where we were learning had kind of come together for a moment. So it was fun to do. It was a fun recording.
Yeah, it was a kick for me. I grew up on the West Coast and just recently on the East Coast, and went to DC for the first time ever about 4 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And actually saw Rock Creek Park, and I was like, after all this time, made the connection.
Yeah,
so,
it's great.
But I mean, that Rock Creek Park, City Life, Title Cut, Happy Music, man, it's just so many great tracks on there. What was the vibe like in the studio, when you were working on some of that stuff, and who directed who, and, did you come up with your own beats? Did you get any guidance, or how'd that come together?
No, I didn't get any guidance. I certainly didn't get any guidance. I made up my own stuff. I mean, I played what I heard. I mean, I put it this way. Say if I bring a song to the table, like Flying High, or Love Is Love, or whatever, it's my song up to the point that everybody starts to play on it. Okay? I mean, I initiated the idea, the concept, but their performance made the song. So with Kevin's chords, Joe's bass lines, Orville's guitar, Barney's guitar, Alan's whatever, Bird's had voices and strings, all that stuff. It changed. I mean, the music went from a single idea to several ideas. You know what I mean? And so the vibe was always like, it's your song, but it ain't your song. But it's like, well, this is my song. I mean, it's not that kind of thing. The interpretations, the way they interpret the songs, the way I interpret their songs, that's how they come up with what they came up with. I didn't say, okay, well, I need this bass line. Like, for instance, on Happy Music bass line, I was playing bass, and Joe was playing drums at the rehearsal. Because Bird would make us come to the gig like 5 hours before anybody got to practice. So we'd be in there at 1 o'clock, and they ain't even finished cleaning up the room yet. And the gig ain't till 10 that night. And so we in there just farting around, man. I'm playing this and Joe's playing drums and we screwing around. And we just come up with this beat, this groove. Oh yeah, nice, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, blah, blah. And then because we taped everything. And so we had those little Marantz tape recorders, man. We taped everything. And took back, listened to it, went out to California and said, okay, let's cut this track. Boom. We cut the track. I was in the studio, Rock Creek Park, do it in the park, do it after dark. Oh yeah. I came up with that line. That was it for that. Happy Music. I wrote the hook. I didn't write the verses. Byrd wrote the verses. And so it was a collaboration, whether we liked it or not, whether we wanted it or not. Because sometimes they put stuff on your song like, oh man, I didn't want that on my song, but it's too bad. It's on there. So, it was not, it wasn't a contentious thing, but it's just how it went down. And, we were rookies, man. They weren't going to trust us in the studio, with the stuff. But what started happening is because we grew up also not on jazz, but on Hendrix and Led Zeppelin. I'm a rock head, and I always loved John Bonham, man, and them killer drums, and Grand Funk Railroad and Procol Harum and all those kind of groups. So I went to watch all of them. And one thing that they always had they had raw, killing guitar sounds, very heavy smashing drums, beat toms, and bass. And our music was kind of weak, in my opinion, And so we fought, tooth and nail to get a little more kick, a little more bass. Instead of the guitar sounding like the Isley Brothers, it sounded like, Van Halen, that's where we were going. We were pushing towards that, which was starting to, create some friction, of course, with the recordings because, they found this conservative niche, for us, being the guiding light, being, walking in rhythm, and you can't create that song but one time. Songs like that, in the night, some songs can only be recorded and created in that instance one time. People can copy them and read them. They will never do what that song did that day. It had to do with the planet, the weather, the temperature, everybody's attitude. That one day it all came together. It will never happen again. So you can't try to recreate that on every record after that, because basically what happens, you start going downhill.
Mm-hmm.
And when the music started to change, because at the end of the 70s, it was starting to go into disco. That's when a lot of other stuff started changing. We didn't have any problem with it, but the people were used to a certain kind of sound. But those vibes in the studio will never happen again, because none of those people are going to ever be there in the same place at the same time anymore. And I know people in the business don't understand that, but it is really a magical thing that happens once in a lifetime for certain things. So, after that point, it was a struggle because we did the next record after Unfinished Business. We did Action, and
Hold these two up. We're talking
yeah,
about there's a
yeah,
City
Life and Unfinished Business. The music was starting to change there a bit. I think Action took it to another level because Action had mysterious vibes on it. It had soft and easy on it.
Supernatural feeling.
Supernatural feeling. So it switched around a little bit, a little more funky, a little less, because they would always be putting all them horns and all stuff on it. A little less cluttered.
A little more plucking bass.
Yeah, a little more plucking bass because it's changing. The thing is changing. And so that is probably the hardest thing for any band that I've ever been with, is to change with the music. Here goes my lights again. Hold on 1 second. That's the hardest thing to do, is to change with the music.